So here to lead the presentation are Distinguished Professor Dr. Cheryl Kataoka and experienced clinical social worker Dr. Mary Fortson-Harwell. Please join me in welcoming them.
Great, and thank you for that introduction and segue for Andrea about vicarious trauma. It's such an important piece, and we didn't want you to be leaving without really kind of a focus on all of you. I am not only a professor at UCLA and doing research in schools, but I'm also a clinician who works in school-based health centers and have been working at Belmont and now at Ramona High School. And so really get the flavor, although maybe not as much as you all who are there 24/7. Really, this topic is so important as you see so many of the students that you work with. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay, well, hi, as Cheryl said, I'm Mary. To get us started this morning, we actually wanted, or afternoon, see, it's been, what a great day already. We're going to do a quick activity, and I have some of our excellent colleagues here at UCLA who volunteered to come up and demonstrate the activity for us. But because you're all so astute from the pictures on the screen, what do you think we might be doing? Yes, has anyone ever played a rock, paper, scissors tournament before? Has anyone played a tournament with this many people before? Yes? We're gonna do the Guinness Book of World Records for tournaments today. So what we're gonna do is you're all going to, not yet, but please pair up with somebody next to you. And I'm gonna tell you a few key points of what we're gonna do. It's gonna be single elimination. If we're able to stand up, we're all gonna stand up when we start. And then if somebody defeats you in your tournament, you will then be the cheer. They will be your champion, and you will be cheering them on as they raise their hand because they're the winner, and we go to the next round, and they find another winner. Does that make sense? Okay. So if you will, please rise up out of your seats, friends. Champions, raise your hand. All right, all right, all right. We're getting there. We got 2 champions. Let's get them together. Is that it? Who's our champion? All right, well done. So why do you think that we had you do something so chaotic and crazy as that? Who has thoughts? Camaraderie, yeah. Support. Laughter, yes. So among all those things, camaraderie, support, cheering for each other, because we don't always need to know our folks that are in the school system with us to really support and get behind them. But laughter, we know, is an important tool to use in resilience. There's a lot of research to show that we have emotional health, physiological health, a lot of really important outcomes that happen when we laugh. There's even some research that shows that we can increase our pain tolerance due to laughter. So when Cheryl and I were really talking about what we wanted to do today, we knew that how important it would be to, one, fill you up with some endorphins today, but then also when we're doing this really important work that you all are doing each day, but when we're talking about difficult topics like trauma and stress, we also need to acknowledge the important role that self-care plays and how the trauma that you're all involved in, the stressors that face you each and every day, what impact that plays on you all personally. So we're going to explore that just a little bit, but thank you for going along with us in that paper, rock, scissors journey.
Great. Well, thank you, Mary, and thank you, everybody, for participating. And I think it's a really nice segue to really ending our day talking about ourselves. And, you know, we really can't do this work day in and day out, working with the students that we've been talking about all day, without really taking care of ourselves first, understanding what's going on and how trauma can affect us as clinicians, as teachers, and as administrators. Because our students really bring all sorts of stories, as we've been hearing all day, to school and to the work that we're doing with them. So talking about secondary traumatic stress is really important. It's defined as the emotional duress that results when an individual hears about the firsthand trauma experiences of another. So really thinking about how we are emotionally impacted by the stories that we're hearing from our students, to understand how our histories can play a role in both our ability to connect with our students, but also the toll that it can play on us. So I really liked this Japanese woodblock print. It's called The Great Wave. And to me, it also reminds me sometimes of how it is working with students that have traumatic histories, and how sometimes being in the clinic, in a room, in a school, with our students and hearing their backgrounds, their experiences can feel like crashing waves around us, can feel like we're just swimming above water. And when I think back to the days when I was training, I was working on an inpatient unit and working with a number of students that had severe traumatic histories. They were arriving in our emergency room with traumas in their background, but really manifesting in all sorts of different ways, from getting in fights with their peers at school and getting kicked out, to cutting, to suicide. And so kind of this compound of hearing those stories over and over again, being fairly new and not having the tools yet to deal with all of these stories, really took a toll on me. And, I would catch myself sneaking off the unit, crying at the elevator. Really, I was taking the cases home with me, not sleeping at night, working kind of on the weekend. And really, it took my friends pointing out to me and some awareness about how my own kind of loss and trauma had impacted my hearing these stories over and over again, and the importance of taking time out, kind of rethinking about, how I'm dealing with working with the students. And, I was able to connect with the students and the patients that I work with, and I'm open and emotionally available to them, but I also need to take care of myself. And that was really an important lesson early on for me. So the types of problems that we might catch ourselves experiencing are things like nightmares, or kind of intense feelings or persistent thoughts about our cases that we're working with, the students' stories, having a difficulty concentrating on our work, on even reading at home, suddenly getting irritable. That was one thing that I noticed in myself too. I was like snapping at people more than I would normally. Unhealthy avoidance, so really avoiding, our students sometimes, or calling, making that extra phone call home. We can feel numb inside and emotionally distant, or sad or guilty about not doing more. And who's at risk for secondary traumatic stress? Well, we're all at risk. We're all working with many patients and students who come to us with their trauma narratives, with their stories of stress, their social stress, their everyday experiences of discrimination. All of these kind of compounded can really take a toll on us. And The people that, research has found to be at risk for secondary traumatic stress are those with empathy. So not necessarily that we should not be empathetic, but, I think being aware of our risk factors. And also those who experience, have had some painful trauma in their own background, or who work with children who have had traumatic experiences or are in the helping professions. And secondary traumatic stress can really impact us on a number of life domains. So physical, emotional, cognitive, occupational, social, and spiritual. For me, I feel it right in my gut. I know when I'm overstressed, when I need a break, when I'm really getting tapped out. I feel it in my stomach. Other people will feel it anxiously with a rapid heart rate or sweaty palms. Some people will start getting sick. Their immune system is not really working up to speed. You might feel it in the emotional domain, feeling hopeless or angry, overly sensitive. In the cognitive domain, we might find that we're having more self-doubt, not able to, and you might feel just like this drawing, just like totally had it, and just want to collapse on the floor and be, not come to work. And, it can also really impact how we do at work, our occupational domain. So we might even find that we're calling in sick more or getting to work late. Lack of patience with the students we're working with. In the social domain, things like isolating. So for me, I was starting to isolate from my friends, and it was really kind of them persistently knocking on my door saying, hey, what's up? What's going on? Blaming others, just not as tolerant as you usually are. And then the spiritual domain, really losing your kind of loss of purpose or meaning in life, or even questioning your faith that you once had. So I think these are kind of just, I go through these quickly for us to just think about them and ponder about them to help us reflect about where we're at, reflect about, what our day-to-day is like at our school sites, in our clinics, to really recognize, where we're at. And kind of as a data geek, I brought you a graph to kind of illustrate how stress can affect us. So, at baseline, we have our normal ups and downs, and at times we might have kind of multiple stresses all at once. We might have those several kids we're really working with that are so intense and kind of really weighing on our hearts and on our emotions. It may lead us to not be able to cope as well as we normally would. And we might feel hopeless and helpless in the situation. We might have a hard time even getting back to our baseline, and may have continued struggles in doing this work of seeing kids and families. At other times, we may, find strategies to deal with stress and coping and return to our baseline. And at other times, these kind of incredible stressful times can lead to what has sometimes been termed post-traumatic growth, where we really have a reset. We really kind of make major changes in our life sometimes, or see things in a very different way that totally transforms either the work we're doing or how we go about life, how we live life. And so that kind of brings me to this slide on resilience. And I love this photo, because resilience can look like a lot of different things. And it may be that, your path to resilience is very different from the person you're sitting next to. And, You might find ways that you really adapt and cope that is unusual, totally out of the blue. But you end up thriving in that direction, even though, it might not be expected. And so resilience, we really think of as the ability to effectively cope with, adapt to, overcome adversity, stress, and challenging experiences. And, I think part of our work is really understanding how we can continue to build resilience in ourselves and in our environments, at our schools, at our clinics, in our offices, so that we can continue to help the kids that we're working with. And so this chart, which I think may be hard to read, but hopefully you all have copies of it, really kind of goes through a continuum to really help you kind of see where you are in terms of resilience, and really with the goal of trying to stay what we call stay in the green. So where you're coping well, you're getting your job done the way you want, you're having good communication. And if you catch yourself kind of veering to the red, where you might be impacted in several of those domains, life domains that I spoke about earlier, feeling socially isolated, it would be, important to seek professional help, to, reach out to your social network, to really re-energize and kind of reframe what you're doing. And then the mechanisms for thinking about resilience. So again, I think we can think about these mechanisms in terms of both our own individual self-care, but also thinking, as we heard from Alhambra, about kind of organizational wellness. What can each of our schools or clinics, departments be doing to really support ourselves as workers, as caring professionals who are really there to help support the children and families that we care so much about? It really starts with caring about ourselves. So understanding the nature and case of stress to really help enhance not just the awareness of our children and families we work with, but of ourselves. Even though we're in these professions helping kids, we aren't always the best patients or help, seekers of help. Oftentimes we're the worst. And so I think just, being aware ourselves and in our coworkers, how important that is, to be open, emotionally communicative, and have those relationships, again, a theme of today. And then to really think how our organizations can do all of these as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Mary, who has another activity for us.
Thank you. And I really love Cheryl's point that sometimes those of us in the helping profession, we are notoriously not as skilled as we'd like to be in taking care of ourselves. We are usually wonderful at taking care of the people around us and the students and the clients that we serve, but when we're turning that focus inwardly onto ourselves, that's usually the first area that kind of gets left to the side. I see some head shaking, so I think that resonates with some of us. So we're going to take just a few moments, and we know this isn't going to be a cure-all, but we'd love to just spend some time reflecting. Research does show us that a key resiliency skill as well is reflection. And narrative reflection is helpful, as well as non-judgmental reflection. So we're going to practice a little bit of non-judgmental reflections today and think about some of the gifts that you all bring to the work that you do. I think that Audra so beautifully opened it this morning saying that we're a room full of experts. So we know that at your core, you all have strength and resiliency and this deep reservoir that you build from or draw from to do this work that you do every day. You'd have to, right? Or you wouldn't be here because of how difficult it can be. But sometimes that reservoir does get quite dry. And sometimes we are in situations where we're not filling it up as much as we'd like. So we're going to take some moments to really look at what those internal reservoirs are that you all bring to your work on a day-to-day basis, from your own personal histories and in your professional environment. Does that sound okay? Okay. So if you could just grab some scrap piece of paper around you. Maybe it's a note card that they so thoughtfully put out for the panel section, or your agenda. You're welcome to write on my face, I don't mind. If you could just grab a piece of paper and something to write with. I'll read these prompts that are on the screen right now. And if you could just take a few moments after I read it, just to write down the first word or phrase that comes to mind. Sound good? Okay. So the first thing is, the gifts that I bring to my work with children are. And please write down the first word or phrase that comes to mind. My own childhood experience taught me. My own experience with stress or anxiety has taught me. The gifts that I bring to my school district are, and the gifts that I receive from this work. So the activity that we're going to do right now is going to be a bit of a metaphorical reflection on resilience. So at your tables, you have a piece of black cardstock with a seed glued to it. You also have a pack of unused oil pastels. We know how important art materials can be, and you are the first lovely people to use them. So what we're going to do is reflect on the words or phrases that you wrote down, but then also to think about what resilience looks like in your own life. Because we know you all are absolute key pieces to the puzzles to building these resilience-informed schools. So we know that for this transformation to happen in this trauma-informed school environment, you all are integral to that. So what does this look like? I'm going to read this prompt. So we'd like you to think about the role that you would like to play in supporting resilience in your schools, your students, your teams, and yourself. As educators, again, we know there are a lot of different roles in the school system represented here. And I really appreciated on the panel how so many of the stories really talked about this interwoven relationship between all the different roles. So we know that each one that you all play is so important. You're a key piece of the puzzle to setting your school, your students, and your colleagues up for success. So please create a picture with the materials at your table in response to this prompt. Building resilience is like cultivating a garden. What seeds will you plant? We have a picture up of a garden that someone drew as an example, but please don't let that stifle your creativity. You can see here that this person thought that some of their seeds were laughter, like we talked about earlier, strength and hope. Your garden doesn't have to be flowers, but whatever that looks like to you. We'll spend a few minutes, about 5 right now, and then I'll let you know when we're ready to stop. Thank you. Awesome. Well, thank you to all of you for participating in that. We also think that this is an easy tool that you could take back and use with your team as a time to reflect together. If you don't have oil pastels, you can also use colored pencils as well on a dark colored cardstock. So the last thing that we're going to talk about today, when we think about really caring for ourselves, since we're talking about the school system, we're going to bring it back to the ABCs. So for that, it is to remember to become aware of what issues are getting you. We talked about this, just having this awareness of what's happening within us and around us. This is the emotion regulation that's been hinted at a lot today as well. Seeking balance among work, rest, play, and alone time. We know balance is such an easy word to say, it's harder to do. When Cheryl and I were talking about this presentation, we each shared times where we haven't always taken as good a care of ourselves as we wish that we would have. And then connect with people that you trust, respect, and for whom you care. So really those people that know you and can be those ones, like Cheryl said, to point out, hey, what's going on, and can help you pour into your reservoir that you're drawing from. And then finally, at the end of the day when you leave, you'll get a bag. It'll be a focus bag. At UCLA, we have the Focus Resilience curriculum, that's families overcoming under stress, that's in the school system. And there are a lot of really great resources. We think they're great. We hope you think they're great too. But one of the resources in there is this My Toolbox handout. And when you're reviewing the handout later, we hope you'll take some time to look at it. And we know just like each student that you face is unique and their own backgrounds that they bring to your classrooms and to your districts are unique, we know that each of you are unique and your work that you do is different and you bring your own family histories as well. So when we're creating our own self-care practices, we know that it will look different for everyone. So your toolbox will probably look different from my toolbox because things that work for me might not work for you. So when you're looking at this handout, thank you. When you're looking at this handout, you can just cross off those ones that you see. They're like, no, I've tried that. That doesn't work. Maybe you can star the ones that you know work so you can know these are the ones that I can really fall back on when times get tough. That's what we really hope to instill with our resilience and coping strategies, ones that become automatic. So then, like Audra talked about, when that fight, flight, or freeze response come in, and that non-thinking animal part of our brain takes over, so we have coping skills in our toolbox that we can just access without having to think about it. One of my favorites on here that I've started to use more and more lately is transitions, and really noticing how you move from work and home and rest and play. I myself have this same ritual. It just takes a few minutes that I practice every day, though. I take my badge off the same way at the end of the day, and I come into my door the same way when I go home, no matter what the time is. And that's so that my mind starts to know this is family time or this is work time. But yes, so when you're looking at the toolbox, so if you see any that you haven't tried before that you think might be nice, go ahead and circle those, and hopefully you can try at least one this week, new way of caring for yourself. Cheryl, do you have anything to add?
No, I was just kind of thinking about, what tools have I been using, and one thing that we recently got was a hot tub, and it has been, not just the hot tub physically is really amazing to, after work, but it's quiet time with either just my husband or my husband and my daughter. We're totally unplugged. You can't have your phone in the hot tub. And so it is 10, 15 minutes of solace that we have now built into our regular week, and it's great. So I recommend a hot tub to add to the list.
Thank you, you all. Thank you for the work that you do. We appreciate you.